Hello there, my RPG lovers, and welcome to another video. So yesterday I was in the middle of editing a brand new video for Titan Quest 2. I was compiling all the info we have for the game, I watched all the videos and took some notes. I watched the 40-minute developer video they had about the game. I also did some assumptions, stuff I usually do when I don't have the chance to play the game for myself, and I take all the info we have about it. And I was working on it for a couple of days actually, and in the middle of all of this I get a Discord notification that Titan Quest 2 is now available for playtest and you can request the access for it. I was really happy at the same time, but sad because I had to scrap the whole video, but most importantly I was very happy because I will finally get the chance to play one of my most favorite ARPGs ever, like that I waited for 19 years and that I thought we're never going to see anymore because the previous developer of Titan Quest sadly closed down a long time ago. And in the meantime we had some spiritual successors like Grim Dawn, for example, which was basically the game working on the same engine and from some of the same people from Iron Lore that work on Titan Quest, but I lost all hope for Titan Quest 2 before we got to see the announcement trailer in 2023 for the sequel, and I was worried and excited at the same time, and now we are here finally. We can try the game for ourselves, and you can also request the access key for playtest version of this game on Steam. I was playing the game all night basically, and I'm going to tell you my first impressions of it, of the gameplay and the game in general, but we're also going to talk about the early access version of the game and what info we have about that, because this is just the demo version we got to see on Gamescom last year. It's just a simple prologue which you can finish in about, I don't know, it took me around an hour and a half or something like that. It depends on your pace. I definitely tried to explore everything and try to see everything which this demo has to offer and level up my character as much as possible, so I can talk a little bit in depth about these mechanics that we can expect in the sequel. We are definitely going to have more content when the early access drops on Steam, and we have some interesting information about the release date of this early access version, even though we don't have the official release date, because as I was compiling all the info and watched all the gameplay videos, I watched that developer video they did about Titan Quest 2 demo, and I think one of the developers accidentally leaked the release version of the early access Titan Quest 2.
When we are talking about the initial early access, then this is the first launch version that we will bring out in winter.
So yeah, we're going to talk about all of this, starting with what we can expect from the early access version of the game and how it compares to this demo version of the game that I got to play yesterday. Titan Quest 2 will come out on Steam in early access. Now, I'm not sure if one of the developers in this video accidentally leaked the release date of the early access, because he said it's coming out in winter. I don't believe I ever saw any info about the exact release date, except that quote-unquote coming soon on Steam. So yeah, we're apparently going to get Titan Quest 2 early access in winter, and it's supposed to have around 12 hours of gameplay for the completionist playthrough.
Kill the wolf! You useless meatsack!
Here's the thing though, this video is 6 months old, and we got to see some meaningful updates for Titan Quest 2 in the meantime. They announced 3 masteries for the early access: Warfare, Earth and Storm. However, in one of the recent updates they posted on Steam, they also announced a brand new mastery. Rogue Mastery is going to be in early access as well, and we got to see him in action in the newest unlisted video they posted on YouTube. This is not the case in the playtest version that I've been playing yesterday. There are only 3 masteries that you get to play in the demo. That would be Warfare, Earth and Storm, and you even get to combine 2 masteries at one point. However, the demo doesn't have nearly enough content for some serious playtesting of these combinations. Only the prologue is available in the demo, but the early access version is going to have a lot more content plus the prologue that we can find in this demo. I'm going to assume that we could get even more content out of early access just because of the new Rogue Mastery, especially if we want to try out different combinations. I mean, if Titan Quest 2 is even close to being as replayable as the first game, you can probably get a lot more hours than that, even in the initial early access phase. They made sure to point out that initial early access phase. They are going to update the early access phase with new content, which is to be expected. And those new updates will bring more chapters, monsters, masteries and pretty much everything else, according to this video. We are going to get 3 big boss fights in the initial phase of early access, which doesn't sound that much. although it should be enough to see what we can expect from future updates, and it should be enough to get a good feel of the gameplay. The playtest demo only has one big boss fight at the end, and speaking of getting the good feel of the gameplay, I think the demo does a decent job with that. I really wanted to play more after I was done, which is a good sign. Now, all of this is obviously just low-level gameplay, but it's good enough to see in which direction the game will go. One of the major reasons why I loved Titan Quest 1 so much was the epic Greek mythology setting.
You there, soldier! If you've come looking for rest and peace, you won't find it here in Helos.
And the great art style that the game had, which also made it age very good in general, if you ask me. I mean, you can tell the age of the game by looking at character models, but when it comes to the environments, if you can run this game in some high resolution, it still looks wonderful, and I think it aged very well, and I like the combination of Greek mythology setting and those vibrant colors we could see. Titan Quest 1 also had a great visual variety and a lot of different zones to explore, like Egypt, Greece, Orient, snowy areas, and all of those zones looked great. And they also brought some brand new expansions for this game, like 15 years after the release, which is kinda crazy, and those brand new expansions also brought some brand new zones which added to the visual variety of the game, so I think this is going to be very hard to beat when it comes to the sequel, and so far this is my only concern when it comes to the visuals, I guess, because this is part of the visuals when you think about it, the visual variety. I think Titan Quest 2 definitely looks like it could have some decent visual variety, but I don't think we can expect to see many different places like Egypt and Orient in this game, which is kinda sad, but on the bright side, I think Titan Quest 2 looks amazing, and they definitely managed to nail the atmosphere, not only with the graphics, but with the music as well. There are some very nice looking scenes even in the demo, so I fully expect them to expand on this in the full game, and I expect to see some great looking areas and great atmosphere. They also talked about how they want to keep the game looking vibrant and colorful, while at the same time having the dark areas like dungeons and some special areas which are going to be darker than usual. So yeah, I definitely think they managed to nail the artistic style for the sequel, and it looks and feels like a Titan Quest game, at least to me, which is a huge thing, and it's not an easy thing to do when you think about it. Titan Quest 2 is obviously going for that brighter and colorful look, but more importantly, I think they managed to create a similar artistic style to Titan Quest 1. I said that Titan Quest 1 was a bit more cartoony, especially when it comes to character models. You get more customization options in the sequel when making your character, with some presets you can select. Now, I'm not sure if the full game will have some more customization options, but the demo only offers you some presets, it's nothing crazy. I think the character models look decent for a top-down ARPG. The music in the background really stole the show here, it's such an amazing soundtrack. I also noticed they tried to recreate the sound effect you get from loading the game, and I think they did a good job with this small attention to detail. You immediately start fighting some familiar enemy types from the first game, like crabs, birds, and later some skeletons, as well as some brand new human NPCs who are worshipping a griffin, of all things. Overall, I like the graphics in the demo, but I can't wait to see more areas in early access version. As for some attention to details, which is kinda related to this topic, Titan Quest 1 has something very satisfying. You could physically see items that enemies would going to drop, like armors and weapons, which made the game so much more immersive and satisfying. Well, Titan Quest 2 is also going to have this feature, although you won't get to see it in the demo. The developers talked about this in that 40 minutes video I mentioned, and there are some clips from that video where we can see something similar. That's also related to ragdoll physics in a way, and being able to see those items drop from dead enemy bodies was very satisfying. Wow, I sound like a freaking psychopath here. Speaking of ragdolls, they also addressed the lack of ragdoll physics, which is another feature that made Titan Quest 1 so satisfying. They said they just didn't have enough time to implement this in the trailer and the demo, but they will have a deep ragdoll system in the sequel. Meaning that the amount of force you apply to enemy bodies upon death will depend on various things like damage and skills you use. That will be very interesting to see. While we are still on the topic of graphics, the UI looks pretty good as well. It's nothing crazy, but it tried to keep the same philosophy as the first game, and it's not that different compared to most ARPGs out there. The best part about it is the UI for masteries, and the general style of this UI just screams Greek mythology. I love those little icons they have, and apart from slightly confusing details deep in the mastery tree, I think these UI elements look very nice. It's very easy for the eyes, and it's pretty clean in general. As for the performance, I have to say the demo works almost flawlessly on my PC. My PC is definitely not top of the line. I have an RTX 4060 Ti and I was able to run the game on 2K resolution on high details with DLSS settings on quality. Now let's get a bit more serious about the gameplay and talk about some gameplay mechanics, features and what I got to experience in the demo, as well as what we can expect to see in the full game. The demo throws you straight into action from level 1 and you get to experience the combat right away.
Tale of the mortals' victories.
I play this game with an Xbox controller, which works great. As for the controls in general, I think they are solid, but there is still some room for improvements here, and I'll get to that in a second. You start off without a mastery, and you only have a basic attack with a sword, as well as the ability to dodge twice. Striking enemies in this game feels decent and satisfying. I think it's good enough for the sequel to be enjoyable, but Titan Quest II feels like it won't have the most impactful combat out there. As far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have to be the ARPG with the best combat, but that doesn't mean the gameplay feels bad in general. It's also going to get a lot better at higher levels, because that's usually how all ARPGs work, but so far I'm satisfied with the fundamental mechanics of the game. The controls are snappy and responsive, and using the dodge button feels good. Enemy attacks are well telegraphed, and even the most basic enemy types in the game have at least one stronger ability they can use. You can see the icon above their heads when they prepare some strong attacks, which is pretty good. As for the improvements I mentioned, I think the combat can feel a bit clunky when you use default attack ability. For example, I think your character should automatically switch to the next nearest enemy after you kill the one you're attacking, but instead you are forced to manually turn around and use the ability again. I mean, it's not a huge deal, but it definitely makes the combat feel a bit clunkier than it should be. Even the first game actually had this little feature, so there's no excuse not to have it in the sequel. It also seems like all enemy types, in the demo at least, have one much stronger NPC that can deal way more damage to you. And I remember developers talking about this. They mentioned that all major enemy types belong to a certain faction. There is not much info about this in the demo, but this kinda reminds me of Grim Dawn's faction system. The more enemies you killed which belong to a certain faction in Grim Dawn, the more unique bosses from that faction you unlock. I really enjoyed that in Grim Dawn, so hopefully we get something similar here. You can only play the demo on normal difficulty, and it's pretty easy for the most part. But if you just try to mindlessly fight some of these groups of enemies, with those stronger NPCs I mentioned, your health is going down very fast. Even as a Warfare melee character that I played in the demo. Speaking of which, you get to choose a mastery soon after you start the game. There are 3 playable masteries in the demo, Warfare, Storm and Earth. And later in the demo you get to choose another mastery, which is the same design philosophy from the first game. I love the dual mastery system so much in the first game and in Grim Dawn, and I think it's a very interesting progression system. I'm not sure how many masteries are we going to get in the full game, but I expect to see at least 8. Titan Quest I expansions brought some new masteries, but the base game had 8, so that's what I expect from the sequel. The way the system works is very similar to the first game, but there are some notable changes and additional features. For example, you don't get to invest leveling up points into the mastery tree itself, but you still have to reach a certain level in order to unlock more passive and active skills. You get active and passive points separately, and they are separated in the skill tree as well, which is a nice quality of life feature. Now you get to customize each passive and active skill with modifiers. You invest leveling up points into a skill of your choice, and by doing so, you unlock more modifier slots. Even modifiers themselves have different levels, but they will take up more modifier slots upon leveling up. This might sound a bit complicated, but after playing the game for like 20 minutes, you should know exactly how all of this works. It's yet to be seen how these changes to the mastery system will affect the build diversity and playstyles, but so far I like what I'm seeing here. For example, this powerful melee attack that you can get as a Warfare mastery deals heavy single target damage and some AoE damage. This skill has a modifier which slows down your attack speed, but makes your powerful attack strike twice in a row, and you get a new animation for this. I'm not a huge fan of skills in RPGs that feel the need to give you some penalties in exchange for some benefits, but it doesn't seem like a huge deal here. And you can probably offset these penalties with different items later on, like for example the attack speed penalty. Speaking of which, there is a very interesting new system for weapon types in the game. Weapons are classified as one-handed and two-handed, but they also have this thing that developers call families of weapons, I believe. So for example, even though two-handed melee weapons are much heavier by default, some of them are classified as light, medium or heavy. I found some two-handed axes in the demo, which require agility as a stat, which I didn't have because I focused on warfare mastery that uses strength as the main attribute. I found it really interesting, and it seems like it can open a lot more possible playstyles as well as allow the player to mix and match playstyles. They mentioned that even a mage could get a lot of use of some heavy two-handed weapons if they roll with a certain stats. For example, if the axe has a fire effect and you use fire spells, it might be of a great use to you, even though it's a heavy two-handed weapon. I love that idea, and the demo has glimpses of that system, but nothing major. Speaking of weapons, you're able to get very strong variety of weapon types in the demo. There are one-handed swords, daggers, staves, two-handed heavy and light axes, light and heavy bows, and so on. Even the bows can be heavy or light, and they require different attributes. That means that I can use a heavy bow, even though I focus a lot on being a melee warrior that works on strength. What's a bit disappointing when it comes to this, there is no option to have two weapons equipped at the same time. I'm not sure if this will be in the full game or not, but it's not available in the demo. I certainly hope to see it in the full game. I was able to find a very strong two-handed axe for my build by doing a certain side quest. The attribute system is pretty straightforward in Titan Quest 2. You have 4 different attributes where you can invest points, which also affect the secondary attributes. You can also see which primary attribute affects the secondary attributes, so it's pretty easy to invest points into supporting the build you wish to play. At least it seems so. We'll have to wait for some high-level gameplay experience to properly judge this. I mentioned dodge ability before, and it seems like it's going to be one of the most important abilities for all character builds. Most stronger enemies will cast something on the ground that you have to avoid, or they just have abilities that are much easier to avoid with a dodge. You can improve this ability by investing points into it, and some abilities and items can also improve it in a couple of different ways, even in the demo. I think Rogue Mastery will benefit the most out of this ability, but like I said, it's pretty much necessary for all playstyles. Although if you're tanky enough as a melee character, you probably won't need to rely on it that much. Speaking of defensive abilities, we also have a barrier spell. This is very similar to energy shields in Path of Exile, for example, but it works like an active spell that you have to use. It can also be improved with different abilities from masteries, so it will be interesting to see how good it is later on. As for the level design, Titan Quest 2 is going to have a semi-open world. You can find secret small areas even in the demo, and some areas are much wider compared to the beginning. However, the prologue is still pretty linear. I really hope the full game will have much wider and open levels, but I did enjoy trying to discover every nook and cranny in this demo. There are optional areas that you can certainly miss if you don't pay attention, and the game awards you with special loot. Again, this is just a prologue demo area, so expect zones to be at least somewhat similar to the first game, in terms of scope, I mean. Titan Quest 1 wasn't exactly an open world RPG in a traditional manner, but it had a lot of very wide open areas to explore, not only on the open, even in dungeons. I would say that's another major concern of mine for the sequel, but let's wait for the early access version and the full game before we can properly judge it. I think Grim Dawn is the game they should look for inspiration, because that game took the Titan Quest formula and basically improved each major feature of it. I still consider Grim Dawn's map to be the best out of all ARPGs out there, but I don't think Titan Quest 2 map will be that big, at least judging by the prologue and things the developers had to say in some videos. Having a semi-open world is totally fine, it can be amazing if done properly, so we'll see. The world map will be completely handmade with no procedural generation, which is music to my ears. It's not like I hate procedural generation, but I always prefer to have handmade open worlds in my RPGs because, after all, my most favorite RPGs ever are built like that. They will probably still use some procedural generation for the endgame systems, but that's yet to be seen. The boss fight against the Griffin at the end was decent, but not extremely exciting to be honest. It's more than enough for the first boss you get to fight. The Griffin has around 3 to 4 unique abilities that you have to worry about, and they work okay, it's nothing to write home about. The story is also pretty simple so far. All you're doing right now is basically running away from the Nemesis goddess. NPCs are fully voice acted, and the voice acting is decent for the most part, but definitely not amazing.
Aristotle, my priestess, but she couldn't hide you forever.
Yeah, I had a ton of fun with this demo last night, and I'm looking forward to jump right in again and play another playthrough of this short little demo, because I want to test out everything and level up all masteries just to see all the effects and all the modifiers for the skill trees. And I'm looking forward to see what you guys think about this demo, and did you request the access for the playtest? But yeah, anyway, I had a ton of fun with this demo and I can't wait to play more, so yeah, I'm looking forward to that early access version of the game. I'm definitely going to cover it in depth when it comes out, so you can expect me to cover everything about the game. I'm going to make multiple videos about it, because Titan Quest was, and it still is, one of my most favorite RPGs ever. It's the game that got me into Diablo-like RPGs, hack and slash action RPGs, however you want to call them, so stick around if you want to see that. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more content like this. And if you want to go a step further, consider supporting your boy by becoming a YouTube channel member or a Patreon. Huge thanks to all my current supporters, and I'll see ya in the next one.